So I've mentioned a few times on this channel that my favorite fiction writer is Jack Vance, who is also favorite fiction writer of a lot of well-known people, probably most prominently George R.R. Martin. And so there was this collection that Martin edited, Songs of the Dying Earth, of tribute stories. And when I read this book, I felt like there were really only two stories in this book that really captured the feel of Vance's stories. And so one of them was by Tanith Lee, who is behind me there, Tales from the Flat Earth, who she came to prominence because people accused Neil Gaiman of ripping some of her stuff off after his controversy. And I've read some of her other stuff, and I'm not really a sword and sorcery person, which is, a lot of people often think, oh, Vance fans should like sword and sorcery, and I really never been terribly into it. And then the other writer, who I was like, this writer really has a feeling of Jack Vance, was Kage Baker, who she's best known. She wrote this series of, I think it's 8 main novels and then 3 supplementary novels called The Company or Dr. Zeus Incorporated. And she was only writing for 13 years because she got her start late and then she unfortunately died of cancer young. I think she started writing in her 30s and she died in her 40s. But she was very prolific when she was writing. And this book, or this series, The Company novels, I am just amazed that no one has tried to adapt this as a science fiction series because I feel like it's made for it. And I'm not going to go into a lot of details because I don't want to spoil anything, but the first 5 books in the main series of 8 seasons, each of them stands alone while still setting stuff up for the last 3 books, and the last 3 books begin to build narratively and accumulate. And it's a story about, so there's this company that discovered 2 things, immortality, but you can only give it to children, it's very expensive, and time travel, but you can only go forward in time back to where you came from. And so, because most people aren't rich enough to get immortality except for their kids, it's not really feasible there. And then time travel, of course, you can't go back in time, grab stuff, bring it forward. So what they do is they go back in time, they find orphans, they raise them, and they have them bring stuff that supposedly was lost in history forward the long way so that it's rediscovered later on. And that's basically the idea behind The Company, and it gets interesting in the last 3 books. And the main protagonist is this woman named Mendoza, who is from Spain, and she was, I guess, in the Spanish Inquisition, and it's in the first book. And she has this recurring love interest who seems to be, there's 3 people who, they seem like they're the same person, but they're not. And the woman who ran my writing group, when I mentioned, like, this seems like the series that I feel like should be I don't understand why it hasn't been adapted. She said, well, it's basically a romance series, isn't it? And I'm like, is it? And she's like, all the people I know who like it are women and they like it for the romance angle. I'm like, I guess there is a romance angle. I guess the average female fantasy is to have 3 men who are all tall, weird-looking, identical in appearance, slightly cranky, but also really smart, and slightly different personalities, apparently. But that was not why I was reading it. I found the concepts in this and the stories very interesting, and I didn't even pick up on the romance angle, and I don't think it's enough of a main angle to even call it romance. It has a romance plot that, again, I wasn't even picking up on that as a reason for reading it, even if apparently most of the people who read it are women who are reading it for that reason. I thought it was a really interesting story with some really interesting concepts, and it is set on Earth, and it's about time travel. And maybe that's part of it, is time travel stories tend not to do as well as space travel stories. But I feel like this is like, as long as you have a somewhat competent showrunner, which admittedly not a guarantee, this should be really easy to adapt to be a successful science fiction show where each book is interesting enough to be a season. First 5 seasons stand alone, and then you build on it for the last 3 in a way that she's already planned everything out. So, don't know why it hasn't been adapted, but I feel like it should be. Anyways, I also recommend this. I do like Kage Baker. Not one of my absolute all-time favorite science fiction series, but she is a good writer in her own right, and might have been one of the giants if she'd lived longer. And so anyways, thanks for watching. I'm Magpie, this is Leela, and we'll see y'all in the next one.